Inflation pattern over 500 years. US dollar is next. It always starts the same way. An empire at its peak. Rich, powerful, and unstoppable. Its money becomes the world's money. But then something shifts, until one day, it's gone. That story has played out 5 times in the past 500 years. And right now, every indicator suggests we might be watching it unfold again. This time, with the US dollar. The moment that changed everything. In 1944, world leaders met in a small hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The British pound had ruled global trade for 2 centuries, but Britain was broke after 2 world wars. So, they handed the financial crown to America. From that moment, the US dollar became the backbone of the global economy. Every major currency was tied to it, and the dollar itself was backed by gold. It was the beginning of what many called the American century. Factories in Detroit, oil fields in Texas, and Wall Street in New York powered a machine the world depended on. For 80 years, the dollar sat on the throne. But just like the empires before it, signs of strain are starting to show. The same warning signs seen before every past currency collapse. So, what's this pattern that keeps repeating, and how close are we to seeing it happen again? Pattern of power. Every global reserve currency follows 4 stages. First comes the rise, when a nation introduces innovation that changes the game. New technology, trade routes, or financial systems. Then comes the peak, when the whole world starts using its currency because it's stable, trusted, and convenient. But right after the peak comes overextension. The nation spends too much, fights too many wars, and prints too much money. And finally comes the collapse, when that currency loses trust and something new takes its place. Portugal led world trade for 80 years. Spain's silver coin ruled for about a century. The Dutch guilder lasted around 78 years. The British pound? Over 200. And the US dollar has ruled for 81 years so far. The average lifespan of a reserve currency is about 95 years. You don't have to be a mathematician to see where that leads. The question isn't if the cycle turns, it's how fast. And the cracks are already visible. Cracks in the armor. In 2000, around 70% of the world's foreign exchange reserves were held in US dollars. By 2024, that number had dropped to just under 58%. That means fewer nations are holding dollars as their safety net. The share of US Treasury bonds held by foreign investors has also fallen, from over 50% during the 2008 financial crisis to around 30% in early 2025. Why does that matter? Because foreign investors are what keep the American debt engine running. They buy US bonds, which fund the government's spending. If that demand fades, interest rates rise, borrowing becomes harder, and the dollar weakens. It's the same dynamic that toppled empires before. When the world stops trusting your currency, everything starts to unravel. And right now, trust in the dollar isn't fading by accident. It's being challenged head-on. Rise of the rivals. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has expanded. Now it includes Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. Together, these nations are building a payment network called the BRICS Bridge, designed to bypass the dollar entirely, using digital currencies backed by their own central banks. That's not a small experiment. That's nearly half the world's population building an alternative to the dollar system. And it's working. Countries are signing energy and trade deals settled in yuan, rupees, or local currencies. Saudi Arabia, once the backbone of the petrodollar, has started selling oil in other currencies. The foundation that kept the dollar's dominance alive for 50 years is starting to erode. But maybe the biggest problem isn't coming from outside. It's what's happening inside the US itself. Debt spiral. As of March 2025, US public debt stands at $36.4 trillion, about 124% of GDP. For perspective, that's higher than Britain's debt ratio when its empire collapsed after World War II, and America's spending hasn't slowed down. Over $8 trillion has been spent on wars in the Middle East, trillions more on stimulus, bailouts, and rising interest payments. The country now spends more servicing its debt than it does on national defense. Historically, this stage, overextension, has always been the point of no return. When Spain found endless silver in the New World, it seemed unstoppable. But too much money led to inflation and 4 separate defaults. The Netherlands went broke fighting Britain. Britain itself spent decades trying to maintain its global military presence before its debt exploded to 270% of GDP. Each one believed it could spend its way through decline. None could. And yet, the US is still holding the world's reserve currency. Why hasn't it collapsed already? The dollar's secret weapon. When Nixon cut the link between the dollar and gold in 1971, most economists thought the dollar would crumble. It didn't. The US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia in 1973. Oil would be priced only in dollars, and in return, the US would guarantee Saudi security. That deal became the heart of the petrodollar system. Every country needed oil, which meant every country needed dollars. That forced the world to keep using American currency even without gold backing it. For decades, this system gave the US the privilege of printing as much money as it wanted without facing the usual consequences. Other countries had to earn dollars. America could simply create them. But as energy markets diversify and countries look to alternatives like the yuan or digital payments, that automatic demand is weakening. The petrodollar system, once America's shield, is slowly losing power. So, if the petrodollar fades and debt keeps climbing, what does history tell us comes next? The fade of faith. When the world loses faith in a currency, it doesn't vanish overnight. It fades. Britain's decline took decades. The US overtook Britain economically long before the pound lost its global status. That same slow-motion shift might be happening again, this time with China leading a multipolar financial order. The Chinese yuan isn't ready to replace the dollar on its own. Its markets aren't as open or trusted. But what's forming isn't another single empire. It's a web of regional systems. BRICS nations trading in their own currencies, Gulf states pricing energy in multiple denominations, and digital currencies removing the need for a universal dollar. That's something entirely new. A world without one king of money. And while it might sound far off, the groundwork is already being laid. Can America avoid the pattern? History shows that every reserve power falls for the same reason: overconfidence, overspending, and a loss of productive capacity. In earlier stages, nations build. In later stages, they borrow. America's manufacturing dominance has been slipping for decades. Its trade deficits are permanent. Its debt keeps expanding. Portugal's ships, Spain's silver, the Dutch banks, and Britain's colonies. Each was a symbol of dominance that eventually became a burden. For the US, that burden is its global military presence. 900 bases across 130 countries. The cost of being the world's policeman is draining the treasury dry. If history rhymes, then America is somewhere between stage 3 and stage 4. And the scary part? No empire has ever reversed the pattern once it began. But decline doesn't always mean collapse. It just means the world changes. And it's changing fast. The past 5 centuries were dominated by one empire at a time. The next one might be shared. A multipolar world where trade is divided between regions. The dollar, the yuan, the euro, and maybe even a BRICS-backed digital coin. No single nation would hold absolute control. That shift could take years, maybe decades. Britain's dominance didn't vanish overnight. Even after losing its empire, the pound remained a major currency for decades. The US could follow a similar path. Still powerful, but no longer the power. Right now, the dollar still makes up nearly 60% of global reserves, and it remains the safest asset during crises. But the long-term trend is clear. The world is diversifying, and every percentage point lost brings us closer to a turning point. So what happens when that point finally comes? The Sixth Empire. If the pattern continues, we're approaching the transition phase, the moment the world starts to reorganize itself around new financial centers. Maybe it won't be one country this time. Maybe it will be a system of alliances, digital currencies, and shared control. Whether the next chapter is peaceful or chaotic depends on how the US manages its debt, adapts to change, and shares power in a shifting world. Because when money loses trust, it takes everything with it: influence, security, and stability. And that's the real question now. Not whether the dollar will fall, but how the world will handle what comes after. What do you think? Is the dollar next in line? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure you like the video and subscribe to our channel. We've included sources for several of the facts mentioned. Find them in the description. Thanks for watching.